Hi, I'm Todd Jones, host of the podcast Pressbox Access. Here's a clip from my conversation with Malcolm Moran. Malcolm lets us tag along with him and Bob Knight when the late Indiana basketball coach visited his hospitalized player, Landon Turner, who had been paralyzed in an auto accident.
So in the aftermath of the 81 national championship season at Indiana, following that period, Ray Tolbert was a senior, so he graduates. Isaiah Thomas, in a move that was pretty unusual at the time, leaves after a sophomore year to go into the NBA draft. And then that summer, Landon Turner, who was an absolutely essential part of that team down the stretch and in the tournament, was in a tragic auto accident on his way to Kings Island and was paralyzed.
Right. Terrible.
So before the start of the next season, I suggested to Arthur Pincus, who was the editor of the Monday section, to try to do a story about what had happened to this group so soon after winning a national championship. So I make my appointment for my audience with Bob Knight, and it was at 8 o'clock in the morning. That was when he was available. So, like a lot of us, that's not a time I would have picked. Most sports writers are not particularly strong morning people, but hey, that's okay. If he's available, I'm there. So I'm sitting in the outer office at about 7:45. He comes in and takes a look at me and says, "Am I supposed to talk to you?" And I said, "Well, I hope so." And he says, "Okay, just a minute." And he goes into his office and he takes care of a couple of things. I go in. I ask him a couple of preliminary questions about this theme, and he leans back in his chair, and I remember him saying, the trouble with you guys, now I am immediately put off because I'm not trying to be one of you guys. I'm trying to develop something that's me.
Right.
So the trouble with you guys is that you're all doing the same story. And it's all, woe is me, poor Indiana this, poor Indiana that. And I politely interrupted. And because I'm not pleased that he's categorizing me with kind of this trivial approach. And I said, no, that's not why I'm here. I'm here to do a story about a group that achieved at an elite level together. It happens to be a basketball team. And after this elite level achievement, all these different things have happened, some of them very good, some of them very bad, to put the people in that group in a very different place. That's why I'm here, and that's the story that I'm here to do. And at that moment, I figured, if he kicks me out, he kicks me out. From that moment on, he could not have been more kind. And so in the course of our conversation, he mentioned that that afternoon, he was going to be speaking to a group of trial lawyers in Indianapolis. And so as we're wrapping up, and I was in with him for close to an hour, and as we're wrapping up, I said, by the way, is there any chance that I could just go listen to you speak to that group this afternoon? He said, why would you want to do that? And I said, well, just out of curiosity, I know what you say when you talk to us, but I have no idea what kind of things you'd be talking about when you talk to a group like that.
Right.
And he said, well, let me think about it. Call the SID office. Let me think about it. So that afternoon, I called the office, and Tom Miller, who I think was still there at the time, says, Coach says it's okay, and he wants you to meet him at the office. He'll give you a ride. And I said, well, that's very kind, but really, that's not necessary. I can drive myself. He said, no, Coach said, meet him here. He'll give you a ride. So now he's giving me a ride, and he's doing 80, going up 37 from Bloomington to Indianapolis, and I'm clinging to the seat, wondering if he has considered the fact that there could be Purdue graduates that are state troopers.
Exactly, right.
But he said when we get into town, He said, I got a stop to make. Well, okay. And before he goes to the Hyatt, which is where this event was, he goes to Methodist Hospital. Mm. And he walks, I'm walking with him. We go in the elevator. We go off a floor where the sign says ICU. We walk right past the nurse's station, and he walks me into Landon Turner's hospital room.
Wow.
And this is the part that I know was not an accident and that I'll always be grateful for. He introduced me by name, but not affiliation. Mm. He just said, hey, Landon, say hello to Malcolm Moran, not New York Times. Mm-hmm. Because he had to know he was letting me be a fly on the wall. And he had to know that if he said New York Times, Landon's going to be wondering what's going on, and the authenticity of the moment is gone.
Right.
And he let me watch the byplay between him and Ernie Klein, who was his high school coach at Arsenal Tech in Indianapolis, wow, for about a half an hour.
Wow.
And they're laughing. Landon had started to grow a mustache, which obviously was a violation of team rules.
Yeah.
And Knight's saying, like, you were going to test me now, weren't you? And they're laughing, and, and then he says, I'll see you next week, and we leave.
Wow.
Now, he didn't have to do that.
No.
And that's, I don't know what it was that I did when, maybe there was something about the sincerity or the conviction that I showed when he put me on the spot. I don't know.
Yeah, you challenged him. You stood up for yourself, right?
Well, I did. Yeah. Because I felt that he was trivializing what I was trying to accomplish, and I wasn't going to be rude, but I was going to hold my ground.
Well, I think he respected the fact that you did stand up for yourself, and you separated yourself from being just generalized,
And he provided access to a moment that, here we are more than 40 years later, and it's still a memorable thing out of all the things I've done.
Wow, what a wonderful story. I would love to read that story someday. I just have never come across it.
Well, it was the first thing that I did that got into an anthology. The Sporting News in those days picked up the best sports stories model that had gone back to the 40s, I think. And that was the first thing I did that got into that collection.
Well, I'll be certain.
And it wouldn't have if not for that ending.